The restaurant was buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses when the manager's voice cut through it all. He sneered at my father, saying, "People like you don't belong in here." Customers chuckled. My father's face burned with humiliation. He stayed quiet. I stayed quiet too, but not for long. Because months later, in the same restaurant, I returned with a contract in hand. This time the manager wasn't laughing. He was begging. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments. The sound of cutlery and quiet laughter filled the upscale Italian restaurant. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and the air smelled faintly of truffle oil and garlic butter. Couples in pressed suits and dresses leaned over candles, whispering to each other. Waiters in black vests glided between tables, balancing silver trays. For most people, this was just another fine dining experience. For us, it was supposed to be a rare treat, a family celebration. My father had finally finished paying off the mortgage on our modest home after decades of working double shifts at the auto plant. He wanted to celebrate properly. No takeout pizza, no backyard barbecue. A real restaurant, the kind he had passed by so many times on his way to work, always saying, "Someday maybe." And now, after years of sweat and sacrifice, someday had come. He had shaved, pressed his best shirt, and polished his old dress shoes until they almost looked new. My mother wore the pearl earrings she'd been saving for special occasions. I was 19, still in college, and I could see how much this night meant to them. My father's face glowed with quiet pride as we walked through the heavy glass doors. But pride is fragile. It takes only one cruel voice to shatter it. We hadn't even been seated when the manager appeared. He was a tall, broad man with slicked back hair, a suit that screamed arrogance, and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. His name tag read Rick, General Manager. He looked us up and down with that thin, cutting smirk people use when they've already judged you. "Can I help you?" he asked, though his tone suggested we were already a problem. My father cleared his throat. "Yes, reservation for Johnson. Table for 3. Rick's smirk grew wider. He glanced at the book in his hands, then back at us. "Johnson, huh?" He dragged out the syllables like they were heavy in his mouth. "Don't see it here." My father frowned. "I called 2 days ago. Spoke with a woman, she said everything was confirmed." The manager tapped the book with a manicured finger. "Funny because I don't have it. Maybe you misunderstood." Behind us, I could feel the weight of other diners' stares. The hush of whispers. A few heads turned away quickly, but others watched openly, their faces painted with curiosity or amusement. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her hand brushing my arm. "We're sure it was confirmed," she said softly. "Could you maybe double-check?" Rick's smile snapped off. His voice hardened. "Look, this isn't the kind of place where everyone can just walk in. Our guests expect a certain atmosphere. People like you." He let the words dangle, poisonous, letting everyone around fill in the blanks. "People like you don't belong here." The word struck my father like a slap. His shoulders stiffened, his mouth opened, but no words came out. The color drained from his face. A ripple of awkward laughter came from a table nearby. One man shook his head and whispered something to his date. She covered her mouth and giggled. I felt my stomach churn with hot, sick fury. My father didn't fight back. He just nodded once, tightly, and turned toward the door. His voice, when it came, was low and unsteady. "Let's go." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the reservation book in the manager's smug face. But I followed because my father had already walked away, and my mother's eyes were glassy with unshed tears. We stepped outside into the night. The restaurant's golden light spilled onto the sidewalk, mocking us. Cars rolled past, couples laughed, and inside, diners returned to their meals as if nothing had happened. On the walk back to the car, no one spoke. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching. My mother reached for his hand, but he kept both shoved in his pockets. The silence was heavier than shouting would have been. When we finally got home, my father disappeared into the garage. Through the thin walls, I heard the sound of metal clanging, tools dropping, the loud rev of his old project car. It was how he hid his pain. I sat on my bed, fists clenched, replaying the moment over and over. The humiliation. The laughter. The words. "People like you don't belong here." It wasn't just an insult. It was a verdict. A reminder that no matter how hard my father worked, no matter what he achieved, there were people like Rick who would always see him as less. And I decided then that I would not let it end like that. Weeks passed. My father went back to his shifts, my mother busied herself with church and neighbors, and life pretended to go on. But I couldn't let go. Every night, lying awake, I saw my father's face as Rick humiliated him. The way he swallowed his pride to keep from causing a scene. The way he let the cruelty pass because fighting back would have meant more pain, more shame. I started researching the restaurant. Digging into reviews, news articles, anything I could find. It was a popular spot, owned by a mid-level franchise group that managed a string of high-end eateries. Rick had been manager for almost 5 years. Some online reviews praised the food, but buried among them were comments hinting at his behavior. Manager was rude and dismissive, wouldn't seat us until we looked more presentable. Felt like we weren't welcome. Never going back. It wasn't just us. He had done it before. The more I read, the more the fire inside me grew. At 19 I didn't have power. I didn't have money. But I had time, determination, and the certainty that I would see Rick fall. It started small. I began documenting everything. Screenshots of reviews. Notes of every complaint I could find. I spoke to a couple of people who had posted about him online, and they told me stories almost identical to ours. Then, at college I found something unexpected. An internship program. A local investment firm specializing in real estate and hospitality was looking for research assistants. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door. I applied. I got in. The firm's offices were a world apart from my father's garage. Glass walls, sharp suits, the smell of espresso machines instead of motor oil. My job was grunt work, compiling reports, running numbers, organizing files. But I soaked in everything. And quietly I kept track of the restaurant chain. Their financial health, their properties, their expansions. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The franchise group was struggling. Their lease on that particular restaurant location was nearing expiration. And the landlord? None other than the very investment firm I was interning at. That was the moment everything clicked into place. I didn't tell my parents what I was planning. Not yet. My father wouldn't have wanted revenge. He would have said it wasn't worth it. But I knew it was. Not just for him, for everyone who had ever been humiliated by Rick's smirk, cut down by his words. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Late nights, extra projects, volunteering for anything that got me noticed. My supervisors began to trust me with bigger tasks, and soon I was helping analyze lease renewals and potential property acquisitions. Every time I came across the restaurant's file, I felt a sharp jolt of satisfaction. Their sales were dipping. Complaints were rising. The franchise group was desperate to hold on to the location, but they were behind on rent. Opportunity was circling like a hawk above prey. And I was patient. Because revenge, I realized, isn't loud. It's quiet. It's steady. It's waiting until the moment is perfect. And my moment was coming. In that same restaurant where Rick laughed at my father and told him he didn't belong, the tables would soon turn. Literally. But not yet. Because the best revenge isn't rushed. It's inevitable. The years that followed tested every ounce of patience I had. Revenge is never instant. It's a slow burn, a simmering storm waiting for the right season. I finished my internship, but I didn't leave the investment world. I stayed, moved up, and studied everything I could about property, hospitality, and ownership. While my classmates partied, I stayed in libraries and late-night offices, learning the mechanics of leases, acquisitions, and negotiations. And quietly I tracked the restaurant. Rick stayed on as manager, his reputation whispered about in corners but never loud enough to reach headlines. The franchise group kept trying to keep the location afloat, but numbers don't lie. Their sales sank year after year, and by the time I was 25, the place was bleeding. That's when the opportunity came. The lease was up for renewal. And my firm, now with me as a junior partner, was negotiating. I pushed the case hard. On paper, the property was prime real estate. The franchise group was desperate, but their financials were a mess. My proposal was simple. Deny the renewal, reclaim the property, and sell it to a new buyer. But the new buyer I had lined up was me. Well, not me directly, I wasn't stupid. Through a shell company, financed partly by my earnings and partly by investors I had carefully cultivated, I positioned myself as the perfect candidate to take over. It was almost too easy. The franchise group folded, unable to meet the new terms. The property passed into my hands like a secret handed under a table. And just like that, I owned the restaurant. The same one where Rick had humiliated my father. I didn't show up right away. That would have been too soon, too obvious. First, I let the dust settle. Staff worried about their jobs, rumors swirled about new ownership. I had letters drafted, transition plans set. Then one Friday evening I chose my moment. The restaurant was packed, buzzing with chatter and the clink of wine glasses. Rick stood at the center, barking orders at waiters, adjusting his tie with that same smug grin. He thrived on control, on the illusion that he was untouchable. I walked in through the front doors. No reservation. No explanation. Heads turned. Some of the older waiters squinted, recognizing me faintly from years before. Rick noticed me last. His face twisted into irritation as he strode over. "We're at capacity," he said sharply. "Next time, make a reservation." It was almost word for word what he had told my father. I smiled calm. "Don't worry. I have a seat." His brows knitted. "And who exactly are you?" I pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket and placed it in his hand. "Your new boss." For a moment, the noise of the restaurant seemed to vanish. Rick stared at the paper, the contract naming me as the new owner and operator of the establishment. A flicker of confusion, then disbelief, then panic crossed his face. He sputtered, This is some kind of joke." "No joke," I said softly. "As of this morning, the property belongs to me. Which means everything here does too. Including your employment." Gasps rippled through the nearest tables. Waiters froze in place, eyes wide, as if the very air had been sucked out of the room. Rick's face flushed crimson. "You can't just waltz in here and—" "Oh, but I can," I cut him off. My voice was calm, steady, but each word rang like a hammer striking steel. "And I will." I stepped up onto the small platform near the bar and turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the tables, "there's something you should know. Years ago, my family came here to celebrate my father's hard work. We had a reservation just like anyone else. But we were told, by this man, that we didn't belong. That people like us weren't welcome." Whispers surged. All eyes turned to Rick, whose jaw tightened, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. I continued, "Tonight, it feels only right to correct that mistake. Because from this day forward, everyone belongs here. Everyone deserves to dine without being judged for the color of their skin, the clothes on their back, or the money in their account." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others clapping softly. "And as for you, Rick," I turned to him. His smirk was gone, replaced by something desperate, almost pleading. "You're fired. Effective immediately." A gasp ran through the room, followed by an eruption of applause from several tables. Staff who had suffered under his arrogance couldn't hide their smiles. Rick's voice cracked as he tried to protest. "You can't. This is my life." "No," I interrupted. "This was my father's dignity. And you stole it from him. Now you answer for that." Security, already briefed, approached quietly. Rick's eyes darted around the room looking for allies but found none. Diners avoided his gaze, staff looked relieved. As he was escorted out, he shouted, "You'll regret this. You think you're better than me? You're nothing." I watched him go, my expression calm. "Nothing," I repeated softly, "is exactly what you are now." The doors closed behind him and the restaurant erupted in cheers. The following weekend I brought my parents back. When my father saw the building, he hesitated. His face tightened, old memories flickering in his eyes. "Son, are you sure about this?" I nodded. "More than sure." We walked through the doors together. This time no one stopped us. Staff greeted us warmly, led us to the best table, and treated my father with the respect he had always deserved. Halfway through the meal, I stood and made a quiet announcement to the staff and diners present. "This restaurant is now dedicated to the people who built this city with their hands and their sweat. To fathers who worked double shifts, to mothers who sacrificed, to families who were told they didn't belong. Here they do." My father's eyes glistened. For the first time I saw pride on his face unmarred by shame. Word spread quickly. Local papers picked up the story. New owner fires longtime manager over past racist incident. Social media buzzed, customers poured in, and the restaurant's reputation transformed. It wasn't just a place to eat, it became a symbol. As for Rick, he vanished into obscurity. Last I heard, he tried and failed to get hired elsewhere in management. His name was stained, his arrogance exposed. And my father? He never spoke about that night again. But every time we passed the restaurant, I caught him glancing at it with quiet satisfaction, a small smile tugging at his lips. Revenge is rarely clean. It doesn't erase the pain of the past. But sometimes, it restores balance. That night when Rick sneered, "People like you don't belong here," he thought he was defining us. Instead, he defined himself. And in the end, it wasn't us who didn't belong. It was him. If you liked my story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks for watching.